How do, cowpokes? And welcome back to Unexpected Awesome. When it comes to the golden age of cinema, there are very few genres as ubiquitous with it, quite like the Western. Comedies, dramas, action films, historical epics, screwball comedies, romantic comedies, almost everything is there. And one of the biggest and most accomplished names in this subsection is none other than the legendary Howard Hawks. If you've never heard of Howard Hawks, you've likely heard of somebody who has not only seen, but adored the work of Howard Hawks. Cutting his teeth in the stunt and second unit works in the silent era, he managed to set himself aside as a master of multiple genres from the 30s all the way to his retirement in the 1970s. Everything from screwball comedies and ensemble comedies all the way to grand epic westerns. However, it was in the fusion of those two styles that he made his greatest cinematic achievement in 1959's Technicolor Titan Rio Bravo. Not only being a box office smash in its time, it helped reformulate the contemporary understanding of what Western films could be, focusing not so much on conquering the frontier, but on maintaining law and order, where villains were not so much roving bands of savages and bandits, but instead greedy carpetbaggers seeking to push around townsfolk and pilgrims looking to build a brighter future on the frontier. So successful and so significant is this, not only has it been remade several times across the intervening 6 decades by other filmmakers, some works of which are classics in their own right, but more significantly, it was remade by Hawks himself no less than 2 more times, once into what I would argue is the even better film in El Dorado, and finally in the movie that capped off Hawks' career in Rio Lobo. As with any revisiting on previously worked material of an older cinematic classic, it seeks to expand on the possibilities of what the story can be. Instead of taking place over several weeks in one small town in a range war in Texas, Rio Lobo takes place over several years, starting off with the pursuit of rebel bandit guerrillas in the wake of a daring army payroll heist in the waning days of the Civil War. He finds himself captured by and then bamboozling the 2 rebel officers in charge of the gold heist and offers them their freedom in exchange for the traitor who sold them the information to even pull off the daring robbery. They refuse, and when the end of the war rolls around, he's the first one to meet up with them as they're released from a prisoner of war camp, asking for their help in finding the traitor, out of revenge for the death of his young protege who perished tragically during that heist. Several months pass, and the junior officer of the 2 reports that he's seen one of the 2 traitors that dealt with him and their captain in his old hometown. So, the Union officer and the rebel captain make their way out there to Rio Lobo, Texas, where they find themselves embroiled in a range war between a carpetbagger rancher, his bent sheriff crony, and their small army of corrupt deputies. With only a medicine showgirl and the wily old coot of an uncle of the minor officer, they take on the corrupt carpetbagger and attempt to outwit the bribed sheriff and his army of bully boys in a series of standoffs and a climactic final siege. There are a lot of underknown positives about Rio Lobo, but I wouldn't feel right getting to them unless we got over the obvious blemishes first. First off, this is probably one of the most ambitious stories that Howard Hawks has ever used Lee Brackett's classic tale to tell. Unfortunately, the craft heap on display, as well as that of most of his principal cast, just falls short. It doesn't help that the script gives 90% of the most important interactions in the film, whether it be the motivating death of pivotal characters in the first act to drive the main character's story throughout the film, as well as the romantic dialogue between the leading lady and the smooth-talking young buck that co-share the top 3 parts of the film, just feel rushed and very blatant. This may or may not be an effect of some of the tensions behind the scenes that scuttlebutt surrounding the film alludes to, that the large egos of an old-blood Hollywood star and 2 up-and-coming movie stars in their own right, just butting heads and not working well with the director or even their other co-stars, led to possibly hurried shoots, which means that not the ideal delivery of, on paper, story and characters with a lot of potential just don't come through. But when it comes to issues, that's basically the biggest issue of the entire film. The sets, the direction, even Yakima Canutt's excellent second unit action work just absolutely help make this film not only watchable but genuinely enjoyable. The action scenes are not only well shot and easy to follow, they're incredibly well staged and can range from daring multi-stage train heists, simple lightning fast quick draw shootouts, to a climactic castle siege that is possibly the single most obvious story element taken from the original Rio Bravo. But that's not even the biggest advantage the film has. While the dialogue of the main characters may not be great, the overall acting quality is incredibly solid. John Wayne is as avuncular as ever in the late stage of his career in this film, and while Jorge Rivero and Jen O'Neill generally butted heads a lot with the director, they bring through a lot of empathy and humanity in their performances, being simultaneously very cocky and very independent, but also quite tender and individual moments, though not in a lot of pivotal ones that would have helped really sell their ending, more intimate dynamic. However, I would argue the best performances in the film go to just like the other background supporting cast. Top hat wearing lone Confederate fusiliers, saucy, fiery blooded hotel barmaids, all the way to the final champion of the film, Jack Elam's legendary old coot in Old Man Phillips, a hard-drinking, unbelievably sneaky, and just sarcastically vicious old man who brings easily the best lines and the most hard-hitting action in the whole film. John Wayne may have been the one tasked with giving him hell, but it's Jack Elam that followed through. Back all this up with an incredibly somber and melodic Jerry Goldsmith score, and you have yourself one of Howard Hawks' most underrated films, though in comparison to the two films that made it even possible is a very understandable reason. So, if you're looking to round out your experience with the foundations of not only modern Hollywood, but also like the root backbone of the filmography of one of the pillars of old Hollywood, feel free to amble on through the old school charm of Howard Hawks' Rio Lobo. Well, that's about all I have to say. Stay golden, cowpokes.